We begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Nun Ches Amud Beis, where it says Shalchu Mitam. Okay, the Gemara is going to bring a halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael. Tam goes in Eretz Yisrael, and it's going to go through different interpretations regarding what was said about this halacha, and then it's going to come back to the Mishnah, or one of the Mishnahs that we were discussing before, regarding a case where two people died at the same time under one house that collapsed, and there's a suffix who died first, and it affects the Yerusha and so on. So it's going to be connected to the case that the Gemara brings here that was sent from Eretz Yisrael. So Shalchu Mitam, they sent the halacha from Eretz Yisrael, Ben Shalava ben Nichsei Aviv, a son that's borrowing money on account of his father's properties. Meaning he tells the lender that here, the properties of my father that I will inherit will become a shubid, that this is where you can collect your payment from when I will yarshin it. So then, this is in the lifetime of the father. Umeis, and then this person died. So benoi moitzi miyad alakuchais. The son can come and take away these properties from the lakuchais, from these buyers. In other words, if the father, that is, the father, when he was alive, actually sold his property to buyers, where people bought his properties. So now this son that borrowed the money can come and take those properties away from those buyers. The father died. The father died, so now the son can come and take away those properties from these buyers. Well, wait. The Gemara is right away going to explain that this halacha really does not have any standing at all. Makes no sense. Now, v'zuhi shekasha v'dinei mamanis. This halacha which they sent from Eretz Yisrael, this is a halacha which is difficult to understand regarding this money matter. Okay, that was the halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael. Okay, what the Gemara is going to point out here, it's not that it's difficult to understand. It makes no sense at all. So the Gemara asks, Lava my mapik. This son goes and borrows money when the father's alive, and he's telling the lender that from the properties of my father, you can go and collect. How does him borrowing money when the father's alive on account of the father's properties how does he have any koyach to go and have the lender take from the father's properties? But at this but yeah, the father sold it when he was alive. So it's not there. He's not yashining at all. There's no power to tell the lender that you'll collect from it. Where is there any buyers here? Some Rishonim are actually not good at this line because it seems to just be repetitious from before. It's basically saying the same point. Like, how could he come and tell the lender that you're going to be able to take from these properties? The father now decided to sell it. Or if you guidance it, if you look in the way the story was described in the beginning, it just says that he borrowed money when the father was alive. It didn't say that the father sold. Then it says he can be maitzim yad lakuchais. Where in the story does it say that there were any buyers that the father sold to? Okay, so Ella, therefore the Gemara says, Iyitmer hachi yitmer. If there was a halacha sent from Eretz Yisrael, and it was said about this halacha that it's a difficult halacha to understand, the halacha must have been a little different. And it's as follows. Ben shemacha ben nichsei aviv, a son that sold his father's properties b'chaye yaviv, in the lifetime of his father. So basically, the son is telling the buyer, here, look, my father owns these properties. One day I'm going to inherit them. I'm selling you these properties that I'm going to inherit from my father, that when my father dies, so you, the buyer, should get it. And that's what he's selling now. Okay, now what happened? Umeis. Now this seller died. He died when the father was still alive. And then afterwards, the father dies. So now Benoi, the son of this seller, which is the grandson of the one that these properties were owned by, Maitzi miyad lakuchais. He can go to the buyer and say, the properties are mine. I am the Yerush. I get these properties. My father sold it to you. No, but I am the Yerush. The properties go to me.
Because he sold it behind.
He sold it in the lifetime of the father, correct?
Did he have permission to sell
One second. He sold it in the lifetime of the father, but what is he selling? He's selling to the buyer the rights that when my father's going to die, and then I'm going to yashin it, so you're going to get this property. So now, but this person, the seller, died. Comes his son and says, now that my father died, I'm the Yerush of the grandfather. My father sold it to you, but he's not alive anymore. I'm now the Yiddish of the grandfather, and therefore I want to get this property, and it should not go to to this buyer that bought it from his father.
His father.
Oh, so this is what the Gemara is going to discuss here. So first, one second. Let me just so first the Gemara says v'zuhi shekasha b'dinei mamanis. This halacha here that the son can go and take the property and tell the buyer that it doesn't belong to you, even though my father sold it to you, but now I, the grandson, I am the Yiddish. This is a difficult halacha to understand in dinei mamanis. Why? Why is it difficult to understand? Because v'lei mrolei, let the buyer say to this grandson now that wants to claim Yerusha on the property, avuch mazbin, your father sold it to us. He sold us the rights of this property when he's going to yashin it. Vat mapik, and now you, because your father died, and now you want to claim that you're the Yiddish, you can come and take it out from us. But your father already sold us the rights for this property. Okay, now the Gemara is going to discuss exactly how this Yerusha of the grandson works. But before I get to that, let me just clarify one point here that Tosfos speaks about at length. There's a basic question on this case. How b'chlal could the son sell a property when the father's alive? It's a davar shaloi ba l'olam. It's not his yet. How is a person able to sell something that's not his yet?
Just like you sell the rights.
Yeah, but so how do you? Okay, so Tosfos basically says something like that this person, when he sold, he didn't actually sell the property because he doesn't have it yet. He basically needs money. So he gets this person that's going to give him money, and then he tells this buyer, when my father dies and you'll want to have the money back, you'll take this property. So it's basically sort of like, it's almost like a sale/loan that he's taking money from him now, and then he's saying, I'll give you back the money and you'll take this property, I'll keep this money, that is, and you'll take this property instead. That's basically what's happening here.
Deal too, probably.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, could be. Yeah. Okay, but now the Gemara over here discusses, what are we saying? That this is a halacha that there's a question on it. There's a difficulty with this halacha. So again, what are we discussing over here? Who is the one that has the right now to this property? On one hand, the buyer says, since the son of this person sold it to me when his father dies, so now I have the rights. On the other hand, the grandson comes, the son of this seller comes and says, no, but my father died already. So I'm really the Yiddish. So the fact that my father sold it to you is worthless, because now I'm the Yiddish and therefore I get it. And what did it say over here? That the son died. The son that sold it, there's a grandfather, there's a son, and there's a grandson. It's the son that sold, and that son that sold died.
Oh, the
son died. So now the grandson, and then afterwards the grandfather also died. And now the grandson wants to take the property from the buyers and say that even though my father sold it to you, but I'm the one that's supposed to yarshin this. And we say that they have the right to take it away from the buyer. So the Gemara says, why is this difficult to understand? My kushya, what's the question? The grandson could say, we are yarshining this property directly from our father. From the grandfather. In other words, if the one that sold it was alive, so then he's the Yiddish. And then if he sold it, or he sold the rights to it, however this works, so then the buyer would get it. But if that son that sold it is not alive anymore, now it's only the grandson that's here, so then the grandson is the one that yarshins directly from the grandfather. And the son in between is irrelevant, B'chlal.
Because he died before.
Correct, yeah, exactly.
He never went into his
possession. Exactly. So the grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather. And the Gemara brings, Teida, I'll prove this to you, the Chsiv, because the Pasuk says, Tachas avisecha yu banecha, that the children take the place of the father, meaning in this case, the grandson takes the place of his father, that he's going to yarshin now the grandfather directly. There'll be ministers in the whole land. So this pasuk in the simple pshat is actually a pasuk in Tehillim, which is a bracha, but we learn from here that the children are in the place of the father. So in this case, the grandson is like his father, and therefore he yarshins directly from the grandfather. So then it actually makes sense that the grandson is able to take that property away from those buyers of his father, because the father never yarshin. They're yarshin directly from the grandfather. Says the Gemara, so this is not the case, the halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, that it was said about this, that there's a difficulty with this halacha. So Ella, here the Gemara is going to try a bunch of different options of what this halacha was that they sent from Eretz Yisrael, and eventually the Gemara is actually going to come back after everything to this halacha, that this was actually the halacha, and the Gemara is going to explain and discuss this subject, how the Yerusha of a grandson works. But in between, the Gemara tries a bunch of different options. Maybe it was the following halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, and it was on this that there was a question. The halacha was as follows: the firstborn son that sold his double portion, his second portion that he gets, he sold that to someone in the lifetime of the father. And now this son, that Bechayr, he died when the father was still alive. So now the buyer wants to come and claim that second portion that it was sold to him after the father dies. So comes Benai, comes the son of the seller, which is the grandson, he comes and meitzim yad lekuchais. That second portion that the father sold here, the grandson comes and says, no, I'm yarshening this second portion. Now, and this is a halacha regarding a money matter that was sent from Eretz Yisrael that's difficult to understand. And the Gemara explains why is it difficult to understand. Avua Mazbin, the father sold it to this person. He sold his his second portion as a b'chayr, and iu mapik, and now the grandson is coming and taking it away from the buyer. How does the grandson have a right to that second portion of the b'chayr to take it away from him? So the Gemara now clarifies what's the question there. Now, if you'll argue and say hachanami, let's apply here as well the logic that we said before. The Omar, this grandson now says mikoyach avua the abakasina. I yarshin directly from the grandfather. So even here regarding this chelik of b'chayra, this second portion that the father sold, I now get it directly from the grandfather, and therefore the buyer will not get any rights to this. But the Gemara says, no, it doesn't work that way, because even if it's true that he yashins directly from the grandfather, but b'chelik b'chayra, but in this second portion of a b'chayr, maya v'dite, what connection does he have to this? It's only the son, which was a b'chayr himself. The Gemara now understands that it's only that b'chayr himself that gets a double portion. Even if we're going to say that the grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather, and he's in the place of his father, therefore to yarshin directly from the grandfather, but he doesn't get a chelik of a b'chayr. The fact is, the grandson is not a b'chayr, so therefore if the father, which was the son, the b'chayr, sold the property, the seller is going to get that double portion. So therefore this is a halacha which has a question on it. But the Gemara says, "My kushya." No, what's the question? Dilmi matzi ama. No, this grandson could say, "Mikoyach avua the abakasina." I take the place of my father, and therefore I yarshin directly from the grandfather. And not only that, ub'makayim avkayimna. And I stand in the place of my father. So if my father was a b'chayr, and now I take his place, I also get a double portion like a b'chayr. So therefore, even though my father sold it to the buyer, but if he died, then the grandson is saying that I take that double portion. And therefore, he can take it away and the buyer will not get this. So in other words, the Gemara is extending this concept of to what extent it goes that the child takes the place of the father to be able to yarshin directly from the grandfather. It's even regarding the double portion of a b'chayr. So says the Gemara, Ella, so this was not the halacha where there's a difficulty about it. Ella ikashia hakashia. There was another halacha that he must have sent from Eretz Yisrael, and here, this was the halacha that there's a kasha on this. Tosfos actually says that it's all these halachas that were actually sent from Eretz Yisrael. We're just trying to figure out which one of them is the one that there's a kasha on it. Okay, so it's this halacha here. Haya yidei lo edus b'shtar. What's if there's a case over here that this person knew edus in a shtar, actually nasa gazla, meaning that this person was set testimony or he signed a shtar. Okay, now actually nasa gazlan before he became verified to be a thief. Now a gazlan is pasul for edus. So when he signed the shtar, so you look at the date of the signature in the shtar, that was before we caught him to be a thief. But now nasa gazlan. But now afterwards he became a gazlan. So now he's pasul edus. So now any shtar that you ever want to use to collect money with it, as we learned already before, you have to verify the signatures. Now who could verify the signatures? Usually you could bring the Eidim themselves that signed the shtar to verify their own signatures. But in this case, now that he himself is a gazlan, so he can't come to testify and verify his signatures. Why? Because we're afraid that he's lying. Because when he comes and verifies the signatures, it's worthless. Maybe they sign that it's all just one big lie, the whole thing. And even the date that's written on the shtar, even if it says a date in the shtar that they signed it before they were thieves, So at that time there was still kosher, but maybe the date is also all a lie. The whole thing is a lie. We can't trust him not to come and be mekayim anything that it says in the shtar. But someone else could come and verify their signatures, and once someone else verifies the signatures, we could use this shtar. That was the halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael. Now on this there's a question. If you don't trust the Eidim themselves, or this Eid himself that signed the shtar, why? Because you're afraid that now that he's a thief, so maybe the whole thing is all one big lie. So achrini mehemni, you're going to trust someone else to come and verify these signatures? Why are you trusting him himself? Because you're afraid that if they signed it, that he's a gazlan, he's pasteledis, he's gonna steal. So maybe the whole date as well, maybe the whole thing is all a lie, even though the date says that it happened before he became pasteledis, but who says that's true b'chlal? So how could you trust anybody else to come and verify the signatures? Even if someone else, all that someone else is coming and verifying for you is that these signatures are not a forgery. True, it's not a forgery, but he's a gazlan. He signed it he signed a lie. He signed a sheker. So if we're concerned that it's all a sheker, why would anyone else be able to verify these signatures?
It was kosher.
Huh?
It was kosher.
But we don't know though. When we see the date of the shtar and we see the information of the shtar, there's a concern that the whole entire thing is all one big lie. Why? Because the signatures is from Eidim, or 1/8, which is a gazlan.
It came now.
It truly became now, but maybe this shtar was signed and written after he became a gazlan. And the whole it says previous date, it doesn't matter. We can't trust that. Now the so therefore this halacha to say that someone else can verify these signatures, this is difficult to understand regarding a subject of dinim ominous. Okay, but the Gemara says, "My kushya." What's the question on this halacha? Dilma, perhaps the halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael was sent with another detail here. It's a little different. Kagain, the case here is shehuchsa ksav yodei bebezdin, that this shtar was already verified in Bezdin before he became a gazlan. It's not only a shtar with signatures, but it's a shtar that has the Bezdin's verification on it, which is what's called usually a hempik. Bezdin already have the signatures of three dayanim that signed that it's a verified shtar. And what the halacha that was brought from Eretz Yisrael was saying is that even this hempik as well, meaning the signatures of these dayanim, also has to be verified. And what it's saying is that this person that signed the shtar that now became a gazlan, he can't verify those signatures, but someone else could. So because it was already verified before this person became a gazlan, so we're not chayshish that the whole thing is a lie, as long as someone else verifies the signatures of the bezdin. So then if that's the way the halacha was taught, then there's no problem with this. It says the Gemara Eli kashye ha kashye. If there's a question, so then the question would be in the following case: what's if there's a person that knows for someone edus? In other words, he signed a document in a shtar. Who did he sign it for? He signed it for a friend of his or a relative of his. Before he had any relation to that person, he signed it regarding a property for a person that he was not going to have any connection to that property because he had no power to inherit from that person. So now what happened is now this person is a Yiddish, now he's inheriting that property. Well, let's say the person that he signed for had a closer relative that would have inherited that property. So when you signed for him, you were not as Yiddish at all. So at that time, you were not a Negeya Bedover. You were totally impartial. But now, what happened is, that relative that could have Yarshin from him died, and now you're the Yiddish. You became now the Yiddish, and now you're signing on something which you're a Negeya Bedover. So it's because you're Yashing this. So so this person that now has the rights to the Yerusha of this property, he cannot come and verify his own signature because we're afraid that he's lying about this. He's a Negei B'davar. But someone else could come and verify the signatures. Okay, so now over here, there's the exact same question. It's the Bach here adds in that the exact same question that the Gemara asked before applies here. What is our concern over here? That because now he's in a gay bedava regarding this property, we're concerned he'll lie about it. So if we're concerned that he's going to lie about it, so we can't trust anything that's written in this document, including not the date. If we can't trust anything that's written in this document, why would we trust anyone else that would come and verify these signatures? Maybe the whole thing is just a lie. But again, the Gemara says, "Omai koshye." What's the question? The same as we already said before. We can say, "Dilma hachanami kagan shehuchsak savyada bebezdin." The case of here is that this shtar was already verified before in the bezdin before he became in a gay bedavid. It was already verified before, as we already explained before. So we can apply the same answer over here. So the Gemara says, Elo, so rather there's another case, another halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, Yikashi, if there was a question on a halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, Hakashi, this is it. Haya Yedele be'edus aid, if a person knew edus for someone, or he signed a star for someone regarding property, whatever it is, Atshul Nasach Hasanai, before he became a son-in-law to that person. And now v'nasach hasanai, now he became a son-in-law, and a son-in-law is a relative, a korev. A korev is also possible for edus. So in such a case, who enemed al-ksav yodai, so this son-in-law now cannot come and verify his signature. But others can come and verify his signatures. Or his signature, his signature. Okay, so the question on this is, if he's not believed, others should be believed. The same like the Gemara was asking before. So now the way the Gemara understands this now, it's the same idea. We were speaking before about a case of a person pasal edus because he's a gazlan. And a gazlan, why is he pasal edus? Because we're concerned that he's going to steal and lie. Same thing with a person that's negeya b'davar. So we're afraid that he's going to lie. So over here regarding a relative, also the Gemara understands right now that we're afraid he's going to lie. So if he's not believed to verify his signatures, so why would anyone else be able to verify the signatures? We should still be afraid that the information of the star is all false. Now over here, in this case, if you'll say, let's give the same answer as we said before. Here the case is that the star was already verified in Bezdin before he became a son-in-law, before he became a kodev, a relative. But he said regarding this case that this halacha applies even in a case where Bezdin did not yet verify at all what's written in the star. Still, we say that he cannot verify his signatures because he's a relative, but someone else can. So there's a question on this. How could someone else verify if he himself can't? But on this, the Gemara says, what's the question? Over here, in a case of a relative that's pasala edus, it's actually different than a gazlan or a person that's in a geya beidus. Dilme, perhaps I can tell you as follows: Gzeiras melachi di'iu loy mehemen v'achrini mehemni. This is a decree of the Eibishter in the Torah that this relative is not going to be believed, but others are believed. In other words, what the Gemara is saying is the fact that a relative is pasala edus is not because of a concern that he may lie. That's nothing to do with that. It's just a gzeiras hakosav. The Torah says that a relative cannot testify, even if we're not concerned that he's going to steal or lie. And v'lav mishum de mishaker, not because he's going to lie. So therefore he himself cannot testify and verify his signatures because he's a relative. But someone else could. And you can't ask, even when someone else verifies, maybe the whole thing is a lie. We're not concerned it's a lie, but he himself is still possible. And the Gemara proves this concept, that a korev, a relative that's possible for edus, is not because of a concern that he's going to lie. Because the ilay tema if you're not going to say this, Moshe v'Aaron, how about Moshe Rabbeinu or Aaron HaKohen, l'chaisnam, to say edus for their father-in-law? Mishum delay mahemni, who are you going to say that the reason why a korev cannot say edus is because he's not believed? So could you apply that to Moshe and Aaron? That we're concerned that maybe they're going to lie and therefore they can't say edus for their father-in-law? So in other words, we see, the point is, by a relative, doesn't matter, the person could be the biggest tzaddik in the world, a karev is still pasal edus. Elo, gzeiras, melachu shelo yi'idu lahem. By Moshe and Aaron, they cannot testify for their father-in-law, it's a gzeiras hakosov. Hachanami, so over here in this case as well, gzeiras melachu shelo yod aksav yod lechaisnai, that this person himself that now became a son-in-law for the person that he signed the shtar for, he can't testify for his father-in-law, but someone else could come and verify this shtar. So therefore, this case that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, this halacha actually is very good. It makes a lot of sense. So there's no question on it. So Ella, so now after all of this, the Gemara goes back to the first case that we said before. We go back to the first case that the Gemara brought, a case of a person that sold a property or the rights of a property when the father was still alive, and then this person, the seller, died, and now the grandson wants to come and claim this property, and he tells the buyers, my father sold it to you, but I'm the Yodesh directly from my grandfather, so therefore you have no rights to this. That's so the Gemara goes back to that case. We go back to that original case. And you are asking that this halacha actually makes a lot of sense because the grandson has the rights to claim directly from the grandfather. So your question was, so the pasuk says that the grandchild takes the place of his father. So therefore he yashins directly from the grandfather. So therefore the buyers get nothing. So there's no question on this halacha at all. It's a very simple, good, clear halacha. Says the Gemara, but that pasuk is not a good source. Why? Because of who? Big bracha. That pasuk is a pasuk in Tilim that's just saying a bracha. It's giving a blessing that the grandson, that a person will have children, he'll have a son and a grandson. But regarding a halacha, to say that we learn from here that the grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather, there's no raya from here at all. So therefore, this is the halacha that we say that was a question: how could the grandson take away the property from the buyers? There's no source to say that the grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather. But the Gemara asks on this: so mi matzes amres? Could you say that the brachiksiv, that this idea, this pasuk here, speaking about the children being in the place of the father, that this is all just a bracha, but it's not relevant for halacha at all. Aval in yedin aloi. But Vatanya or Vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah. And here the Gemara comes to one of the Mishnahs that we learned before about the case where two people died in a house that collapsed. So it said, Nafal Habayis Olav Aloviv, a house collapsed on a person and his father, or Olav Al Merishov, or on a person and, let's say, a brother that he would yashim from. And and there's this person that he owes money to now, or the money is going to be owed now for the ksubah, or also a b'chayiv that wants to come and collect his loans from this person. So now the inheritors of the father say that what happened is it's the son that died first, and only afterwards did the father die, and therefore the son never inherited anything from the father in order for the b'chayiv of the son to have rights to collect from that. But the Bal comes and says, no, what happened was maybe the father is the one that died first, and therefore the son did inherit his father, and only afterwards did the son die, and therefore what happens in such a case? The Bal has the rights to be able to take from this property that the son did inherit from the father. That was the Mishnah. So the Gemara now says, what's the case we're talking about over here? When it says Yorshei Av, that there are the inheritors of the father here that want to come and yashin. My love, don't you think, what's the case over here? Yorshei Av means Bnei Meirishov. This is the sons, Bani, sorry. You read it, how do you read this? Bani, yeah, am I right? My love, Yorshei Av, who's the Yorshei Av? Bani, the son. The son of this son that died, meaning the grandson, right? Who's the Yorshei Av now? The grandson. That's the one that wants to inherit the grandfather here. Right? Both the father and son died together in this house, and now there's the inheritors of the father that are having an argument with the Bal Chayv. Who's the inheritor of the father? The grandson that's still alive. Now, Meirishov, when it says over here that there's this person that died together with one that he would inherit from, that's Achi, that's the brother. He would inherit from his brother. Now, so the Gemara says, so let's focus on the first case. The Rashbam did not spell out the second case, but here, the case of the father, the son that both died together, and now it's the grandson that wants to take those properties and not allow the Bal Chayv to collect from it. Now, if you're going to say, the grandson cannot say that I am inheriting directly from the grandfather. Why? Because we'll say the when it says that a son is in the place of the father, that's just a bracha. So if so, even if the son dies first, and then only afterwards did the father die, my hava. Why would that mean that the Bal Chayv could come and collect for this? Why would that mean that the son would collect from this? Let the Bal Chayv still argue and say, Yerusha Savoy and Kashakilna. That when we yarshin, we're yarshining the Yerusha from the father. Again, we can come and collect from the Yerusha of the father. Okay, in other words, what the Gemara is saying is, if the grandson does not yashin directly from the grandfather, the grandson yashins the grandfather only through his father. Doesn't that? So in other words, there's the grandfather, and then the son is the one that yashins the father, and then if the son passed away, so then that Yerusha gets handed down to the grandson. But if the grandson doesn't take it directly from the grandfather. So over here in this case, if the grandfather died first, if the son died first, and afterwards his father died, so even though when the father died, the son was already not alive, so in such a case, seemingly the Bal Chayv of the son has no place to collect from, because they already died before the father died. But even when the grandson wants to come and yarshin, how does the grandson yarshin? The grandson only yarshins through the father that's yarshining from the grandfather. So it's if the Yerusha is passing through the son or the father of the grandson, so then the Baal Chayv could come and say, if it's passing through the father in order for the grandson to yarshin, they can still come and collect their Chayv from the father here. Or the son that passed away, even though he passed away afterwards, but it doesn't matter. The Yerusha is always passing through him. So Elamai, what must be? So the Gemara is trying to prove from here, it must be that what the grandson is coming and claiming is that if my father passed away before my grandfather, that means that I'm yarshining directly from the grandfather. So the Balchayv of his father cannot collect at all, because the Yerusha is going directly to me, to the grandson. Says the Gemara, no, there's no ayah from this Mishnah, because loy Yarshei Av, when it speaks here about the Yarshim of the father, it wasn't speaking about a grandson. This whole discussion we're having here is all about a grandson, whether a grandson Yarshim directly from the grandfather or it goes through the father, and therefore the Baal Chayv could come and take. But we're not talking about a grandson, B'chlal. Achiv, we're talking about brothers. There was no grandson here. It's now the brothers that would Yarshim from this brother. So over there, the brothers definitely Yarshim directly from their father. And Merishav, when it says over here Merishav, also Achi the Avua. It doesn't mean that this person was yarshining from his brothers, but it means from his uncles that he was yarshining from. Okay, that part of the Gemara is already a different cheshbon, what the relevance of this is. Achi the Avua. So therefore the Gemara is saying that there's no raya from this Mishnah. So the Gemara remains by this point that this idea that a grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather, there's a source from it in the pasuk in Tilim, because it says that the children is in this place of the father, but it's not a very good source, because in the pasuk in Tilim you could say that it's only a bracha. It's not necessarily a halacha, and therefore this halacha that was sent from Eretz Yisrael, that in a case where the father's soul, now the grandson could come and take it away. So it's a true halacha, because we know that the grandson yarshins directly from the grandfather, but there's a question on it. Why? Because we don't have a solid source from a pasuk for this halacha. Okay, now the Gemara starts a new Ibaye, which will also be connected to one of the missions that we learned before. Baye my name Rav Sheshes. The Shaila was asked from Rav Sheshes. Ben Mao Sheyirish Asimay Bakever. Could a son? We know a son yarshins a mother. The Gemara before brought psukim for this, but the question is, how about a son yarshining a mother if the son died before the mother? And then what that would mean is that when the mother dies, so who will inherit the mother? So if the mother dies and her son is already not here, the son passed away before, so you would say that the relatives of the mother, her family, would yarshin her. But maybe we should say no, that even though her son is dead already, but her son yarshins the mother bakever, even after he's dead, there's a din of Yerusha that then lahanchela achin min ha'av, and then the son's brothers that he shares with the same father, even if they're brothers that are not children from this mother, and they're children that they have the same father, now his Yershim are going to Yarshim, not the Yershim of the mother. Okay? So in other words, this is a concept we had already before. You have this concept of Yerusha, even Bakever, where it goes to another further relative. So over here, should we apply this also by the Yerusha of a son from a mother? Amalu Rav Sheshes, Rav Sheshes says, Tenisua. We learned this in the Braisa. The Braisa says a case of Av Shenishba, a father that was captured, Umeis Benoi b'Medina, and he died. Umeis Av Shenishba Umeis Benoi b'Medina, and the son died in the country where he is. Okay, so what happened over here is the father died in captivity as well, and the son also died where he is in his country, but we don't know who died first. Or a case of Uben Shenishba, opposite case where the son was captured and died in captivity, Umeis of Medina, and the father died in his country where he is, and we don't know who died first. Now Yershei Av or Yershei Ben, so in this case, if there's an argument between the inheritors of the father or the son, who gets the Yerusha of the father, so in such a case, Yachloiku has to be divided between them. That's the Braisa. So the Gemara says if you read the Braisa as is, it doesn't make any sense. Why? Hey Chidami, what's the case over here? If you read the Braisa as it's written here, so then Hainu Yershia Ninu Yershia Av, Hainu Yershia Ben. Who are the Yershim of the father and who are the Yershim of the son that we're saying that they're two different people? It's the same Yershim. If it's a father and son, so it doesn't make a difference who died first and who died second. The father, the Yerush of the son will be his son, and that will also be the Yerush of the father because he's a grandson of the father. Or if it'll be a brother, whoever it is, it's the same Yerush. It's one family, the father, son. So why are we saying that there's any argument over here? So elalav must be hachikama. This is what the Bryce is supposed to be saying. Av shanishba, a father that was captured and died in captivity, then umeis ben bitoy b'medina. Now there was a grandson, which is a son of a daughter of this person that also died, and it's not clear who died first. Now this was the only Yiddish. This grandson was the only Yiddish alive here, and he died. Or the other case is that Oben, what is it, Bach? Out of here, 1 second, Oben, Oben Bitoy Shenishba, Ben Bitoy Shenishba, or it's the grandson that was captured, Umeis Avi Imay Bamedina, and now the grandfather also died in where he is in his country, and we don't know who died first. So in this case, Yershia Av, the Yershia Ben, the Yershim of the father, and the Yershim of the son, which are not the same Yershim, because this son is the son of a daughter of this person. He's a grandson, but he's a grandson where his mother, he's only a grandson through his mother. So therefore, his paternal relatives, the relatives that he has from his father, are different. They're not the same relatives of the father, of the grandfather, that is. So in such a case, yachloiku, they're going to have to divide between themselves. In other words, over here, the argument is going to be who died first. If the father died first, so then this grandson Yarshin, and then the Yarshim of the grandson get it. If the grandson died first, so then the relatives of the grandson don't get anything from his grandfather. So in such case, you divide it. But now the thing is, if you're going to say, like we said before, that the grandson, a son, he does Yarshin a mother even after he died, even if he died while the mother was still alive. He still will yashin his mother. So nihinami the ben meis bereisha. Even if the son did die first, but even after he dies, a Yerusha that he would get through his mother from the grandfather, he should still anyways yashin it, and therefore and then his relatives, his brothers from his father, should be able to inherit from him. So either way, this grandson, his relatives should be getting the Yerusha, whether the grandfather died first, whether the grandfather died after him and he was already bakever, it doesn't matter. But if you're going to say that a son yashins a mother even after he dies, his relatives are going to yashin. So therefore, what do we see from here? From here we clearly see that a son will not yashin a mother if the son died before the mother, to say that this son now, that his relatives are going to yashin what the son of the mother yashined. So Ravacha Bar Minyomi says to Abaye that this proof you brought it from a Braisa. I'll bring you this proof from the Mishnah that we had before here on the previous daf. The Mishnah said Nofel Abayis Olav Alimoy, in a case where a son and a mother were in a house and the house collapsed. And in such a case, there was an argument who died first. In other words, the question now was going to be who's going to yashin the mother's inheritance? The relatives of the mother, because the son died first, and therefore the relatives of the mother get it, or the mother died first, and therefore the relatives of the son, the yarshim of the son, gets it, because the son yarshin the mother. And it's in this case the Mishnah says Elu ve'elu moedim, both Beis Shammai and Basil that argued in the previous Mishnahs, they will both agree in this case she'achleiku, that we split this inheritance because of this suffix. Now, but if you're going to say that a son yarshins from the mother even if the son died when the mother was still alive, even if the case is that the son died first, but he's able to yarshin from his mother even after he's dead, and and then the relatives of this son should inherit from him, not the relatives of the mother. It shouldn't make any difference who died first. Either way, the son yashes a mother, whether the mother was alive, whether the mother was dead. So again, we can prove from our Mishnah, we clearly see that a son does not yarshin his mother if he died before the mother, to say that now the relatives of the son will yarshin him. So Shmamino, this is a clear proof to this halacha. Now the Gemara explains, what's the reason that the halacha is so? In other words, by other cases of Yerusha, we don't say this. By other cases of Yerusha, we do say that there's a concept of Yerusha even after a person passes away. In the Perek of Yesh Neuchlin, this is the concept that's called Mishmush Nachla, that when you have the closest relative that's not alive anymore, so he doesn't yarshin. But the Yerusha goes through him to the next closest relative. And if that relative is not alive, then it goes through him to the next. You go further and further. But one that's not alive, bekever, there is a mishmush nachla, it goes through the one that's not alive. But over here, by yarshining a mother, we don't say that. A son does not yarshin a mother if he died before the mother died. So what's the reason for this? Amar Abayas said, because Nemra Siba beben. The Torah uses the expression of Siba. The lashon of the pasuk is Leisisa. If you have a Leisisa of Nachla, that you shouldn't transfer over the Nachla. It uses that lashon in the pasuk where it speaks about the son yarshining a mother. And v'nemra siba b'bal, it also uses this term of a lesis of nachla regarding a husband yarshining a wife. Ma siba amura b'bal, just like when it comes to a husband and yarshining his wife, ein abal yerish sishte bekever. A husband does not inherit his wife if he died before his wife. Only if the husband was alive does he yarshin his wife, not if he died first. Av siba ha'amura b'ben, so too when it says by the son that he yarshins a mother, ein ben yerishes imay bekever lahanchal achem and av. He will not yarshin his mother if he died before his mother, to say that his relatives should yarshin that yerusha that he got bekever from his mother. Okay, this is basically the end of this subject, the negate to yerusha. Now, because the Gemara brought the subject about a question of who gets this money or this yerusha, the Gemara here brings another case. And this is a word for word a Gemara that we had before on Daf Lamed, or on Daf Chavtes and Lamed. And Taisus here actually asks that this is very unusual, that the Gemara brings the same exact thing, the same exact halacha and story, word for word, in the same Masechta. You do find in Shas, in different Masechtas, that it says the same thing, but over here it brings the exact same thing from Daf Lamed. So the first story is as follows. A person said to his friend, I'm selling you all the properties of Barsisin. Now, so there was one property amongst these properties that was called, had a name, Barsisin. So now the seller says, this property is actually not a property that I bought from Barsisin. Again, the point was that the seller is selling this person properties that he bought from Barsisin. And then this one property that had that name, he says, no, this is not one of those properties that I bought from Barsisin. It just has a name. Had this name of Barsisin, maybe because it was near the other properties, but it's not a property that ever belonged to this Barsisin. So now, that's the argument here. The buyer says, no, this is a property that has the name Barsisin. This is one of the properties that you sold me. So Asla Kameh Rav Nachman, they came to Rav Nachman, Oikme b'yada de lekeach. Rav Nachman gave the buyer the upper hand, it has that name, and therefore we follow the pashtus that it has that name, and it's part of the properties that he bought. Amalei Rav Nachman, so Rav says to Rav Nachman, no, Dina Achi, this is the halacha. Hamitz mechaveiroi, olavaraya. The buyer has the seller that is, has the upper hand, because the seller is the one that's occupying this property now. The buyer wants to take it away from him, so he's going to have to prove that it's actually one of those properties that he bought from Barsisin, and it's not just a name. So he gave the seller the upper hand. That was this one story. Now on this, Veromi, the Rava, the Rav Nachman, the Rav Nachman. There was a contradiction asked, both in Rava's opinion and in Rav Nachman's opinion, because there was another case where we see that it's reversed. Who has the upper hand, the buyer or the seller? There was a case of a person that says to his friend, my boys by Beisa, what are you doing living here in this house? So the person that's occupying the house says, I bought it from you. And I'm here already for 3 years. So the seller says, yeah, it's true that you were here for 3 years, but while you were here occupying the outside room of this house, I was always occupying the inside room, and I used to walk by you all the time. I would always walk by this room that you were here in. So therefore you don't have a proper chazakah. When it comes to establishing a chazakah, to be able to claim ownership without having a document, as we learned in the third perek of this Masechta, you must have a cheskas gimel shanim. 3 years you have to be there. So now the ma'arer, the seller is saying that I never sold it to you because the fact that you were here for 3 years doesn't prove anything, because I was always inside and I was always walking through there. And there's Eidim for this, according to Taisvus earlier in the Masechta there. He says that he has Eidim that he was there on the inside. So Asla Kameh Rav Nachman, they came to Rav Nachman. So over here, what happened? Here Rav Nachman reverses his opinion. Amalei zil beroyer achilascha. Here Rav Nachman gives the ma'arer, which is the seller, so to speak, he gives him the upper hand. And he tells the buyer, the one that claims he's the buyer, he says, you're going to have to prove that you actually here 3 years without this person that owned it earlier, the Marekama, the one that owned it before, without him ever being there. Prove that you actually here all this time alone. And over here, Rava argues with Rav Nachman and he says, do you know, Hachi, is this the halacha that we force the one that's occupying this place for 3 years to prove that he was there alone all this time? No, the one that's challenging his ownership and is claiming and saying he was the Marakama and he wants to say that he was there all the time, let him bring a raya for this. He has to bring a raya that he was walking through him all the time, that he was walking through the property over here all the time. Okay, so now the Gemara says Kasha de Rava de Rava. So we have a contradiction over here in Rava's opinion, because before Rava gave the seller the upper hand, and here Rava is giving the buyer or the one that's occupying the house the upper hand. And the Rav Nachman, and the same in the reverse regarding Rav Nachman. Before he gave the buyer the upper hand, and now he's giving the seller or the Marakama the upper hand here. So the Gemara says it's not a question at all. The Rava loy kashya. The contradiction in the opinion of Rava is not a contradiction. Over here in the case of Bar Sisin, who's the one that's occupying the property right now? The seller. He's the one that is occupying the property. So therefore Rava says he's the one that has the chazaka, and the buyer is the maitzim mechaverai. But Hasam lekayach kai b'nichsei. Over there, by the case of Shchuna Gavoy, where there's a person that's here in this property for 3 years. So since he's there for 3 years, so he's now the one that's occupying the property. So now the one that's coming and challenging that, he has to bring a raya. So it's very clear. The one that's there inside the karka, he's the one that has the chazaka. The contradiction in the Rav Nachman's opinion is not a contradiction either. It's because Hacha, over here in this case, by the sale of the properties that he bought from Bar Sisin, Kivin da Amalei, since the seller says that the Bar Sisin, I'm selling you properties that I bought from Bar Sisin. No mikri the Bar Sisin. And here, this property that they're arguing about has that name. So it's an assumption based on the name that this is a property that he bought from Bar Sisin. So he's going to have to, the seller is going to have to prove that it's not like the name that it has. He's saying something that's the opposite of the norm. If this is a property that has this name, we would expect that it has the name because it comes from Bar Sisin. Therefore, Rav Nachman said the buyer has the upper hand. But Hacha, over here, when it comes to this person that's occupying this property for 3 years, and now the Marakama comes and claims that I was on the inside as well and I was walking through here, so why do we force him to prove that he was there alone? Because lo yehei ela denokit shtara. If he's there for 3 years, it shouldn't be better than if he was there and he's presenting a star that he actually bought the property. When a person shows a star, what's the halacha with a star? As we learned just before as well, every star always has to be verified. You have to verify the signatures. So over here as well, you don't have a star. In the place of a star, you're there for 3 years. You have to verify that you were there alone for 3 years. Until you don't verify that, you can't claim any ownership with being there with Cheskas Gimel Shanim. And therefore, in this case, Rav Nachman gave the Marakama, the Ma'arer, the upper hand. Hadron Allah Mishemeis. This we shall return to you. The 9th Perek of Masechta Bava Basra, Perek Mishemeis.